Hello and welcome to Reproductive Rebel. I am your hostess, Adrienne Irizarry. As an Eastern medicine practitioner that uses holistic approaches to women's care, I tackle the elephant in the room, our collective frustration with the allopathic healthcare system. In this podcast, I give you a new way to look at your body, understand what it is telling you, and care for your reproductive health. Welcome to this journey. I'm so glad you're here. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are. I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Dr. Antonika Chanel is a professor at the Maryland University of Integrative Health and is a board-certified traditional Chinese medicine doctor and classical naturopath with more than a decade of experience treating patients all over the world. A U.S. Coast Guard veteran, author, speaker, and consultant, Dr. Antonika is committed to influencing and establishing integrative medicine practices in every home. She is a wealth of knowledge, which she's gained from years of mentorship with over 25 leaders in the field of integrative medicine. She has hosted seminars and treated hundreds of patients from around the world. Dr. Antonika is the founder of ChiC Wellness, an integrative concierge medical ministry practice that specializes in treating digestive issues, allergies, chronic pain, autoimmune disease, and more. Dr. Antonika helps individuals regenerate, reclaim their health independence, fuel their bodies efficiently so that their lives can grow into the next level of transformation. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am Adrienne Irizarry. I'm a certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and sound healer, and I am really excited to be joined by Dr. Antonika today on the show. We are going to talk about the things that we love the most, which is how we care for people and their holistic wellness, and particularly on the topic of food and the fact that it is so much more than just clean eating the way that we think about it from a Western lens. So welcome to the show, Dr. Antonika. I'm so happy to have you.
Oh my gosh, it's such an awesome feeling to be here having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. So Dr. Antonika and I have, we've been in each other's circle for a few years now. I have joined her for conversations about peri-steam hydrotherapy, and we've talked about all kinds of ways to wellness, although I know a topic that is near and dear to her heart is food. So I definitely wanted to have her on today to talk about food, although I'm sure she'll join us for a future program. So one of the things that I constantly find in my practice is that there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about eating healthy. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, I do. There are a lot of misconceptions, and I think it's because there are so many different types of trends when it comes to losing weight and what healthy is. And there's so many different, influences. And especially if you're someone who's going to nutrition school or in fitness and you're going to get your fitness certification, the first thing that we learn in in those programs is the food pyramid. And we learn about macros and learn about micros, but really the understanding of what a healthy living and healthy lifestyle is begins after you've learned all that information and you start doing your own research. And so I'm not here to say that keto diet's wrong, paleo diet's wrong, or anything like that, but we really want to take a look at what are we looking to achieve, you know? Mm-hmm. And in my practice, I practice Chinese medicine. I've been a Chinese medicine doctor for the past 12 years, and I've treated people at sea, on land, on private yachts, pretty much everywhere and anywhere in the world. And the very first thing that I always ask is, what is your lifestyle? What are you eating on a daily basis? What does health look to you? What does healthy food look like to you? And I always include the conversation about eating appropriately, because this is what Sun Mao said years ago, a Chinese medicine doctor. He said that the food is where we need to begin the healing practice. And then, you know, acupuncture and herbal formulas, exercise therapy, and other manipulative therapies. And so some of the common misconceptions is that, if I just have fruits and vegetables, I'm healthy, or I only eat a little bit of meat, or I have like maybe, you know, a little bit of this. Well, your body needs nourishment and it needs nutrition. And so we really need to look at what is the goal? What do we want to achieve? And once we identify what we want to achieve, then we can start looking at what are the foods that are good for us based on their therapeutic properties, based on the nutritional benefits they're going to provide for us, because not everyone is alike. We're all individuals, and we have to be treated as an individual, not only in our lifestyles, but in our wellness practices as well.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. An analogy that I use a lot with my clients is two coworkers that have decided that they're going to lose 10 pounds together, and they go to the same exercise classes and they eat salads together at lunch because they're going to be accountability partners. And one woman loses the weight, and the other woman gets really frustrated because she's doing all the same things, but she's not achieving the same outcome. And I use that a lot as a way to explain, and a framework to explain that, you know, food isn't inherently bad. There are just some body constitution types that need certain things in order to be in balance. And there are other body constitutions that same food will kind of work against them instead of for them. So maybe if all of those things that were in that salad were put into a soup, that other lady might have lost weight, right? Because she might have needed more warming properties in her diet rather than the cooling piece. So, you know, it's a really great way to illustrate the fact that not all bodies are the same. And, you know, my approach to working with people is really looking at the whole picture. And just like you said, lifestyle is a huge piece of it. And with food being a form of medicine, right? And a way to harmonize the body, and a way to build a really good foundation as a springboard for health and longevity, you know, it's important to take all of those aspects into account.
You're right. And, you know, it's not only just about, you know, the food. A lot of times it's about the lifestyle. You know, what does your lifestyle look like? Are you very stressed? Has there been stress in your life before? You know, have you been taking synthetic medication? So when a lot of the clients or the patients that I see, I call them clients and patients interchangeably, they have taken a lot of synthetic medication. And so when that happens, that starts to negatively impact the organs on a different level. And so the first thing I say is, okay, we got to clean up the system first so your body can absorb the nutrients. Because if you're not absorbing the nutrients, then you can't guarantee that food is going to be the ultimate source of healing the body. You might need to step into herbal formulas. You might need to step into acupuncture, or maybe even some other things. And every holistic practitioner knows and understands that we must clean up the body. Sometimes the kidneys, the liver needs to be detoxified. And we're not just talking about like a lemon cleanse. You know, we're not talking about just, you know, abstaining from food and doing a fast. We're talking about taking in substances. And what I mean by that is nutrition or homeopathics that are going to help guide the energy to move a lot of the stagnation that's prohibiting the function of these organs to work at an optimal level.
Absolutely. I see it a lot with clients that come in and go, but I'm eating really clean and I'm eating really organic, and I don't understand why I still feel this way. Well, if their body can't process all the good stuff that they're taking in, they're only getting a portion of the benefit, and it shows up in menstruation. So even with the cleanest diet, if it's not all bioavailable, you don't have all those building blocks for optimal menses, for optimal energy, any of those things.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that also comes up in Chinese medicine too. We feel it in the pulse. We see it in the Chinese tongue. We see it in your face and facial diagnosis. And it's interesting how, we don't need to have all these fancy technology in order to take those diagnostics. And then we ask questions about your menses. And you're exactly right. Those are like parameters that tell us what's going on in the body. And if we can just shift our mindset slightly to be able to accommodate for changing those challenges that we're experiencing, the body is so resilient and it will bounce right back. But if we allow ourselves to live in this life of deficiency for a long period of time, that's when many of us will probably decide, oh, well, we're going to try this and we're going to try that, or we're going to try this diet and my doctor says to do this or to take this medication. When really we need to identify what is the focus and then peel back the layers of the onion piece by piece.
Absolutely. One of the questions that I get asked a lot in my practice is, okay, so food is medicine, right? So can food really make me wake up feeling more refreshed in the morning and alert? And based on what you're saying, it sounds like yes.
I am I am living proof. I'm such living proof of that. Before I even came across wellness, my journey began with being in the U.S. Coast Guard. I was very depressed. I was very didn't understand why I couldn't be that female on deck working with a bunch of other men on an aircraft. There was just a lot of depression that was created because of the lifestyle that I was living in. And I didn't know that I was actually contributing to the way that I was feeling. And so when I started to dig a little deeper about, food, I couldn't find the food that was going to help me feel better. But what I found was that acupuncture was helping me get that way, helping me move the energy that was stuck. And then as I started to learn more about food, micronizing my food, taking green smoothies, having more of an alkaline based diet, my circulation was moving more. It was just better. And so therefore I'm able to get up and feel good about myself because my body was getting the nourishment that it needs. When we eat food that is not giving us the nourishment that we need, we are literally causing more toxic load to our system, and toxic load makes us heavy. Mm-hmm. And that heaviness it brings on depression and anxiety, and it just makes us feel very, uncomfortable. So it is very important that we have a standard of well-being that consists of eating food that is going to feed our brain and nourish our blood. I mean, we are made up of a lymphatic system, which is our sewage system. We're made up of a circulatory system, which is where all the blood runs through. And if both of these systems are compromised, then we can't expect to feel the way that we should feel. And the thing that keeps on causing, perpetual issues is when we continue to look to synthetic medication in order to keep us at our status quo. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I am a huge, believer and educator on food as being thy medicine, because this is something that you have in your own home. Mm-hmm. And if you understand how to use it properly and you know how to, create the right types of foods that are going to nourish your body, then that is your medicine. But we have to take the time to learn this process.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And when I talk with my clients about taking a new look at the way that they look at food, they're often surprised when I point to their kitchen cupboard and I go, do you have this herb? Do you have this herb? Do you keep this food regularly in your refrigerator. And a lot of times they'll go, yeah, I make that, I use that, I have that. And I'm like, okay, so let's re-envision how you're using that. So, a lot of times people have these tools at their fingertips and they've just never been taught how to put it into meaningful action so that they can be the driver of their own bus and they're empowered. That's a phrase I use a lot. Like, I want to put people in the driver's seat of their bus because they're the ones that have to live in this body, in this vessel for their whole life. And if they don't know what they don't know, they might not know the tools that they have right at their fingertips in order to empower them to live their healthiest and best life. And that's where I feel, as a holistic practitioner, I step in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's also about like having more conversations like this and being a part of more conversations like this, because, we live in a society today where marketing is what drives us to purchase the things that we purchase. And so, for example, the first thing that anybody could do is take out milk of their diet, because milk is definitely something that we should not be drinking, because there is no other mammal on the face of this earth that drinks another mammal's milk. And it has been marketed to us in a way that just brings more money to the people who are in power. So the thing about milk on a chemistry level is that there is a hormone or is a protein called casein. And casein is a protein that baby calves need in order for their development. But for us as human beings, casein can be a very difficult protein for our body to process. And so over time, we become very lactose intolerant. So what do? We buy the lactose milk. But what we really need is we need a type of vitamin or amino acids that are going to help create the building blocks of protein that we don't get from eating meat and we don't get from drinking animal milk. There are cases in times when, sure, we can indulge in that if we like to do that, but it is encouraged that we drink more of a plant-based milk like flaxseed, almond milk, oat milk. These are much better for us because the body can process it better, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel that the hormones that are in the milk also does not mesh well with a woman's menses and hormonal system, and that's why we start to get these volatile cycles and uncomfortable times of pain and discomfort, and it throws things off completely. So that's just one substitution of why I encourage a plant-based milk versus an animal-based milk.
Well, and I even have some clients that will try to sell me on the idea of raw milk because it's less processed. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there is a process of pasteurization. Pasteurization was designed to make it more safer for us to drink milk. But for example, if you own a cow or you live on a farm and you have milk right from the calf, that would be a more preferred way to drink milk. But at the same time, you have to remember, once it's actually taken from the cow, put through the system, pasteurized, put into a bottle, and then set on the shelf, it's probably been weeks before the milk even actually got milked from the cow. And so for certain instances, yes, and also in certain demographics too. Okay, so people who live in more northern countries where it's very cold, they need more fat in their body. This would be probably a better option for them. But if you don't own the cow and you don't have a cow, then let's look at something that's going to be more efficient for your body because of the stress load that you're living in the city life, or having that very rajasic lifestyle of constantly on the go. Your body needs an amino acid that it can use to build protein, and you're going to get the best amino acids from a plant-based resource.
I agree with you. I've been drinking plant-based milk for years, and I saw a huge shift in terms of how I felt waking up in the morning. That's for sure. Any form of dairy tends to make me feel heavier. And I liked that description that you used earlier about feeling heavy. Now, that heaviness is this, and I'm looking at it from the way that I hear a lot of my clients talk about it, that heaviness, is that weight heavy, or is that a feeling of sluggishness kind of heavy, or could it be both?
We call that in Chinese medicine dampness. And dampness is when phlegm coagulates or a substance coagulates and it starts to create a blockage. And if we don't move that blockage, then it's going to accumulate and eventually it will create a mass or it will create an uncomfortable feeling. Bloating is another form of blockage. And so, yes, it does exist. It's like energy trying to move, but it can't move. And so what do? We, massage our stomach or we take a digestive enzyme. That's another thing too. If we are not taking digestive enzymes and we have these health challenges perpetually, bloatingness, feeling, very just, not so heavy, feeling heavy, then we do want to take an enzyme because the enzymes are going to help us digest the food and help move it through our digestive tract. So this heaviness is something that can be alleviated and by watching the food that we eat, by taking enzymes and understanding that this is phlegm in the system that needs to move. Now, in the digestive tract, there is what's called a mucosal matter that sometimes can accumulate. And if that accumulation persists, then it can block the body's ability to absorb the nutrients, which is absorbed through the villi. And so if we don't clear that tract out regularly, then we're not absorbing the nutrients. And that heaviness is just that. It's that blockage, it's that mucosal lining that keeps on accumulating and keeps on creating toxic load to our system, which doesn't allow our cells to get that oxygenated blood and nutrients and the nutrients that it needs.
Awesome. Now, that blockage, can that add weight to the body in terms of toxic load?
Well, if we're looking at phlegm and its accumulation, now we're talking about the body not being able to breathe, the cells not being able to breathe. And so that eventually will start to sit into the body. Basically, a fat cell grows, and it grows because the body's trying to get energy to the mitochondria, trying to get nutrients to the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. And if it's being blocked, then what's going to happen is the nucleus is just going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the fat cells are going to get bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, that is what you see on the outside, on the exterior. So we can reduce that by allowing ourselves to have more fiber. And I'm not talking about taking things like Metamucil and other fiber relieving type of substances, but, having foods that contain fiber, eating vegetables. And sometimes people have a hard time digesting fibrous foods. And I get that. And so what we need to do is we need to look at, okay, can we micronize it? How can we blend it in a way where our body can absorb the nutrients? And if we're still having a difficult time, then how about taking some enzymes? And if we're still having a difficult time, okay, let's find out exactly what is the root cause of this. And maybe we need to look at homeopathics to help clean up the system so you can start absorbing these nutrients and getting fiber in your system. Because one thing that we don't want is we don't want to own our sickness and our disease. We want to recognize that, okay, this exists. So how do we reverse this? Because this is the support that we need from our doctors. And this is what we get from our holistic doctors, because we are very educated in this area and understand how the body works from a standpoint of using food therapy as a means to reverse or restore the body of health.
I love what you said there, because it made me think about some of the clients that I have seen over time that identify with their gut dysfunction, or they identify with, well, I've always had a hard time waking up in the morning, or, you know what I mean? Like they normalize this. And we have some of these larger cultural subtexts that sluggishness, or we need a cup of coffee in order to get moving in the morning. And, instead of really looking at, well, the body always tries to reach towards homeostasis. It wants to be in balance. So what is creating that disharmony that's keeping us from optimal wellness?
Wow, this is a really broad question, because it could be a lot of things. It can be our own demise. We could be getting in the way of wanting to achieve optimal health, our own mindset, our habits. Having lived a culture of where the lifestyle that we've lived since we were a kid was eating, French fries and, a burger on the weekends, or just, and maybe eating Twinkie came from. This is exactly it. And until we actually understand and realize that these things are not good for us, and that if we just shift, and we need, it's about the mindset. Another thing too is staying abreast and being interested in how to hone our health, because this is something that's not taught in schools. It's not taught in universities. It comes through experience. Our doctors don't tell us about them either, because they don't have the training in this. And so we need to we want to learn how to get past it by hearing and listening to more conversations and being a part of more conversations like this. Another thing too is that we want to turn our eyes to leaders and people who are at the forefront of the farming industry and understand what is happening in our agriculture today. Because if you haven't noticed that our crops are completely sprayed with pesticides that are causing a lot of long-term health concerns in modern day society. And if we are not aware of these pesticides that are in our foods, then we don't realize the value of a detoxification or a cellular reset that is going to help restore our body.
Absolutely. It's terrifying. I'm just going to say it. It's terrifying to think about some of the chemicals that we are getting on the regular in our bodies, that unless it's something that you've placed a lot of emphasis on becoming educated about, that education really isn't in the forefront of the conversation. And, you know, food is as much medicine as our spirituality is to our health, as our emotional state is to our health. Like, all of these pieces are so intertwined in terms of what brings us to optimal health. You know, food can be a very mindless activity for a lot of people in a lot of cultures. We sit in front of the TV, we eat, we work while we eat, you know what I mean? We've lost a lot of the mindfulness around eating, not just in the kinds of things that we're eating and the kinds of things that are being ingested as a byproduct of what we're eating, but also in the habits and practices that we build around the process of eating that really does go into affecting our health.
There's all of that, and I am totally in agreement with you in that. And then there's also the idea that food is a celebration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way that I like to think of it, as, you know, sure, when I'm at home and I'm working, I work hard, I play hard. And what I mean by work hard, I mean that, you know, I want to make sure that I'm giving my body the right and proper nourishment throughout the week, Monday through Friday. If I have kids, I want to make sure that they have the great nutrition that they can, and that they're getting the food that they need, so that way they can go and play their sports and they can perform better. In fact, there's a show on Netflix called Game Changers. And if you've never seen that show before, I highly recommend that you watch that documentary, because it shows you how incredible plant-based nutrition is. And I'm not here trying to convince everyone to go vegan, vegetarian, or plant-based, but it would probably behoove you to watch that and see how incredibly these athletes perform when they have the proper amino acids in their system. And so just having that kind of knowledge and understanding would help us, you know, understand why we need to take a closer look at what we're eating. Another thing too is when you talked about the other bodies, you know, the spiritual body, the physical body, the mental body, these are the practices that help us become stronger in those other bodies. Is a long practice that's existed for thousands of years. And cleansing, in fact, in India, they practice Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
And Ramadan is, you know, fasting from sunrise to sunset, and they eat during the darker times of the day. And this is to help give the digestion a time to just relax and digest the food and to work its way through. Same thing in other cultures. We are the only culture that does not have a practice such as this. We have Lent, which is probably, a couple of weeks or a month or so, but we want to learn to adapt and to identify and experience these different cultures, because that's really who we are as Americans. We are a melting pot of all these other cultures. And so when we look and embrace at what they do, the yogis, they'll do they'll do yoga, they'll eat very sattvic, meaning that they eat the food that they make that day and they don't have leftovers. These are very good practices because of the nutritional value that a food has, the moment from when it is prepared to the moment that it is eaten. So for example, I used to live in Japan for 5 years, and in Japan, we'd go to the markets, and in the markets, they would have all this live eel, live fish, everything was still alive. And you would basically have the butcher or the person who was selling that eel or that fish, and they would kill it for you right there, chop it up, wrap it up in a piece of paper, and send you home with it. At that moment, that animal has the most chi, the most living essence in it. And that is what we are consuming. And that is what we want, not something that's been sitting in the refrigerator for days and days and days. Same thing with fruits and vegetables. When you get fruits and vegetables, you want it coming right off of the truck from the farm into your home, not from the farm into a truck, into a store, into your car, into your refrigerator, and then into your stomach. You want to shorten the lifespan in which a nutrition travels to you. And when we have these foods in our system, we become more clairvoyant. We become more audible. Our senses become more heightened because we have this nutrition in us. And that is really God's medicine. That is like spirit medicine. When we are getting it, when we're growing it, there are so many different ways that we can grow our food now these days. You've got the tower gardens. You can do a little garden in your backyard. And these are great practices because not only are we eating the food that we cultivate, but we're also getting our hands in the dirt, which is also grounding us in spirit. And so wellness is not only a physical experience, but it's also a mental and a spiritual experience.
I have a tower garden because I try to make it as close to home as possible. And I love mine because I live in the north. So my growing season is a little shorter, unfortunately, but the hydroponic system makes it so much easier to be able to have things that are fresh. And there's nothing like being able to walk into my dining room, pick kale and put it into my meal. It tastes different. It feels different. Like there's literally nothing like getting it that fresh. And farmers markets are amazing, not to mention the local economy piece of things, but just being able to get things that are grown in your area. Now, for people who maybe don't have as much access to being able to get produce like that, are there ways of cooking that we can use to increase the level of chi in our food?
There are, and it really depends on the environment that you're living in. For example, if someone's living in Washington State or in Oregon, it's a very cold state. So I definitely would not recommend a raw food diet. However, if you're living in somewhere like Florida or Texas, it probably would be a better idea to incorporate a raw food diet during certain times of the year, because you're not having to, your body's not having to work as hard to try and cook up the food. Whereas if you are in a warmer climate, your body has to work a lot harder. Whereas if your food is more cooked, and it changes the therapeutic value of it, which is going to allow the body to process it better. And that's what you need in colder climates. And so that's why Eskimos would eat, meat. That's why in the northern countries, they would eat more meat, because it's more substance in their body, and it's warming, and it keeps the body heated up in like a furnace. And so I would suggest that, foods that are warming to be consumed in the northern states, and foods that are cooling in, the southern states. And then this also goes for herbal formulas too, depending on if there's a blood deficiency, if there's a chi deficiency, okay, where do you live? And if you live in this region, then okay, what is it that we need to do to help your environment become as conducive to the environment that you're living and working into? You're probably not getting as much exercise in a colder climate than you are in a warmer climate. And so we have to ask those kinds of questions, because it's not true for everyone. Everyone's an individual. We can't just give them all the same herbal formulas. We can make the recommendation, right? We can make recommendations to certain foods, like for example, ginger. ginger shots, ginger tea, adding ginger to your soups is really good. Adding sea salt, Himalayan sea salt breaks up a lot of the phlegm and it breaks a lot of the stagnation up. And so having that into your diet would be much better than iodized salt. And having things that are more herby, like cardamom and rosemary in your food, and growing them would be great. And you can grow them these days indoors under a light. And so there's lots of hydroponic ways that you can do. You can grow your garden indoors, even on a very low budget, and still get the nutrients that you need. But you're right. When you grow them yourself, you never go back, because it's so convenient just to go pick it off from your garden and then, put it in your salad. It's night and day.
Absolutely. Well, and my kids find it, oh no, it's my turn. I'm going to go and pick the kale today. So it becomes something fun. Like, I have kids, and, trying to instill these values in them as they're growing up, is really kind of fun, because being able to fight over who's going to pick it off at the tower garden, makes it fun for them, and makes it something that they realize, oh, this can be a sustainable part of my life that really isn't a lot of work, because, oh, look, my two working parents are still managing to make this all happen. And so, being able to walk my talk and demonstrate the simplicity, like, I'm really hoping to instill that in my next generation. But it's something that, I find really rewarding to be able to share with clients as well, because you're right. There are so many ways to, I've seen some of those hydroponic tabletop, they're small and they would fit in a corner. So if you don't have a lot of room, you can set it right into a window. Or like up here, we don't have lots of daylight. So like my hydroponics tower has its own set of lights, and I set it on a timer and it gets 16 hours of light, and then it turns off at the end, because up here in the winter time, we're lucky if we're seeing like 8 hours of daylight. And so sometimes I'll even go sit next to that tower, because I feel like a plant that needs that light in the dead of winter. So
very true. We do need light. It's phototherapy, and it's a practice in Chinese medicine, or most modern practitioners will use phototherapy, the red light therapy, having that in because we are light beings as well as made of sound and energy. So yes.
Absolutely. And I love that. So I wanted to touch on fad diets a little bit, because, and I know that it's a super hot button topic, but one that I really want to talk about first is low carb. And get your perspective on low carb, because I know how it shows up in my practice, but I would love to know how it shows up in yours.
So this is a really interesting topic to talk about, because I feel like I can talk about it from two different perspectives. I was a fitness professional before I became a Chinese medicine doctor, and I was all about very certain amount of calories I can have, and I couldn't have these carbs and I couldn't have that carb. But as I began to see that was a very limiting way of becoming nutritious and becoming healthy while I was going through my weight program or my competitions, that is when disease begins, because we are not giving our body the carbohydrates that it needs, but we're not giving the right kinds of carbohydrates that it needs. And so sure, there's carbs in everything. There's carbs in fruits, there's carbs in vegetables. A lot of people think of carbs, they think of, low carbs. Okay, then I'm not going to have pasta. I'm not going to have bread. But it's not necessarily about not having pasta and bread. It's about reducing your body's amount in consumption of the amount of glyphosate that is in the wheat that is causing your body to deteriorate the lining of the gut. That is when we become gluten intolerant, and that's when we start to have digestive issues. So when I hear people talking about how they're on a low carb diet, my first question is, well, why are you on a low carb diet? Like, what are you wanting to achieve? Because your body needs fuel, your brain needs fuel. If you don't give your brain fuel, then you're not going to be able to think. Your mental clarity is just going to be completely off. Kids, you see it in kids. Kids are constantly eating lots of carbs. Lots of carbs have lots of sugar. And then what happens? They start to become diagnosed with all of these different types of diagnoses when your kid is normal. The only thing is we're probably not giving them the nutrients they need.
Yeah.
And so my first question is, what is your goal? Like, why are you on a low carb diet? And if it's for weight loss, okay, well, why are you feeling that you need to lose weight? And what has been the most difficult? What have you tried that didn't work? And now let's look at why that didn't work. Okay. Oftentimes it's just because they're trying to eat less calories, but we all know we need exercise. We need to get that ATP going, that we need to get oxygenation in our blood. And even if it's just a light, brisk walk, that would be helpful. But most importantly, carbohydrates if we're not having the right types of carbohydrates, our body is not burning the fuel that it should or that it could. And so that's why we need to really look at how do we make our system work as optimal as possible by cleaning up at least once a year. That's going to prevent dis-ease, and it's also going to help us live stronger. On the other side of that, when we're talking about it from a Chinese medicine perspective, it's kind of funny. We don't look at carbohydrates. We don't look at the food pyramid in that perspective. We don't look at macros and micros because that does not give us the therapeutic value of what that food is. For example, goji berries. Goji berries are a long time been eaten in Chinese culture and Asian cultures because of its medicinal effect on providing the kidneys and the liver and the blood with great nutrients. In fact, when you go to these Asian markets, and they're all over, you can get the little goji berry herbal supplements that come in a small little jar with a little straw, and you take that down, and it's just like having a handful of goji berries. So that is what we want. We want to focus more on the vibrational frequency and the energy level of the organ and bringing that life to its highest resonance with food. Okay. But I can understand that if you're a bodybuilder or a bikini competitor, the first thing that you want to do is you want to shred so your muscles will come through. Well, first of all, that's the most unhealthiest thing ever. I was there. I did that. I was that person. So, but if that's a hobby of yours and that's what you want, we want to look at how can we sustain that in the most healthiest way. And depleting our system of carbohydrates is not the method in doing that. It is more about, from a Chinese medicine perspective, looking at foods from its therapeutic value, giving our body the nutrients so the blood can continue to circulate while maintaining that tightness and eliminating a lot of the water so we can compete and look the way that we want to look in a bikini competition. But if you are just, wanting to lose weight so that way you look good for the summer, then let's shift to the therapeutic value of food versus, the trying to just reduce carbohydrates.
Yeah, I agree. And I see a lot of menstrual dysfunction in women who try to go low carb really drastically. And it totally speaks to your point about there's certain types of carbs that your body really hungers for. So like if you're getting your carbs from a sweet potato, which is higher in fiber, it's a complex carbohydrate, it's an orange vegetable, your orange foods are going to help with the spleen. So you're not going to start seeing spotting between your periods. You're not going to see your cycles getting shorter. So a lot of women that come to my practice, by the time they find me, they go, I'm having an 18 or 22 day cycle. Like, what's wrong? And I go, well, okay, let's talk about what's going on in your life, because stress can totally influence that, and not getting enough carbohydrates or not enough of the right carbohydrates can cause a similar type of stress in the system. And usually something shorter like that, oftentimes carbohydrates is one of the culprits. I did a blog on it a little while ago because I was getting so many people that were coming into my practice. And so one of the ways that I have created compromise in my clients who are very dedicated to the fact that they want to have a low carb lifestyle is, okay, at least in the luteal phase of your cycle, can you please include some squashes, some sweet potato. If you have to measure it in order for it to feel good to you, that is totally cool. But if you can start on the regular minimum in the luteal phase, putting some of these foods regularly into your diet, let's start see how your cycle starts to shift. And I very successfully worked with some clients who were very devout followers of keto, who had started seeing some major wobble in their menstrual cycles level out between using steam and, really focusing in on the diet. I think was the biggest part of the shift, honestly, making sure that they get the right kinds of carbohydrates.
This is beautiful. And this is exactly it. You're incorporating food as medicine into your practice and educating women that this is why you want to have sweet potatoes. You want to have the right kind of potatoes, not just like white potatoes, Idaho potatoes. You want the potatoes with the most nutrients. And then also, you want to make sure that you're having potatoes that are not going to spike those sugar insulin levels. And so that's why, that's what sweet potato, that's its therapeutic value. It helps make that sugar level and the sugar level like just very moderate. It doesn't make them spike. And so this is really key and important to women's health, because if our physicians are not educating us on this level and they're just looking at the problem and then kind of covering it up with a Band-Aid, then we're never going to get to the root cause. And so this is a lot of times why women find that they become infertile after, or they have fertility issues after being on birth control for a long time. Sometimes it takes about a year or two for them to become pregnant, and then all of a sudden they're looking at IVF. And so if you can, I look at it from a different perspective, it's a system. And we're basically introducing the system at a very early age. So that way you can do IVF when you're in your late 20s, 30s, because you think you're infertile, when really it's about cleaning up the system, eating the right kinds of food, regulating, doing practices, small practices like hydroperi steam, and learning about this, because these are practices you want to pass on to your kids, right? You want them to be able to have health independence, and these simple things is what's going to get them there. And then when we experience it, what are we going to do? We're just going to tell all of our friends about it and how amazing it is. And then therefore we won't need a lot of these synthetic things, because we are empowered by the right kinds of food. Another thing too that is really great for women is, you're right, during certain times of your period, and knowing your cycle well is going to show how you feel. So for example, seed cycling. I've written some things on seed cycling and how valuable seed cycling is. Eating certain types of seeds throughout the course of your cycle, because of the amount of omegas that it has. And omegas are the building blocks of the cellular wall that is very integral to the integrity of the cell. And so these small practices is what is key. And this is why we want to make sure that we align ourselves with the right kinds of individuals who have this knowledge and who are passionate about sharing this information, so we can be empowered and take our health into our own hands.
Absolutely. I love what you said about seed cycling. I have talked to some of my clients about doing that. I've seen some really powerful shifts in people's entire cycle experience. People who, may not have been ovulating regularly or not creating enough healthy cervical mucus. All of a sudden, you put some flax in the follicular phase of their cycle, and boom, you've got, day 14 ovulation. You have a nice healthy luteal phase. The temperature stays up. Even in people who are kidney yang deficient, I've seen their heat level be higher when they're tracking their basal temperature with bringing some of those principles in. And it's super easy, like 2 tablespoons of flax, folks. Like, we're not talking about a lot. Something like that, and pumpkin seeds or black sesame seeds in the luteal phase of your cycle. Like, it just makes such a powerful shift in your experience. And like dark leafy greens in your luteal phase. I mean, you're going to need them in both, one for the substance building phase and the follicular phase. But, people who really struggle with liver qi stagnation, and they get really irritable and start having some of those PMS-y symptoms and things like that before their period, pull some dandelion tea into your repertory, or maybe you have some kale with as a side with your meal. All of a sudden, you're starting to see a lot less of that angsty, stuck, bloated feeling that you get just before your period starts. It's amazing the power of food, particularly for women.
I get so excited when you start talking about this because I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. Well, one of the practices that I shared with my mother very early in my education was the power of black sesame seeds. And black sesame seeds, when you look at them on the bottle at the grocery store, it'll say no nutritional value, but all Asian practices will confirm that black sesame seeds are excellent for the kidneys. And what they do is they help increase longevity. For example, if you're consuming 2 tablespoons of black sesame seeds on your rice or on your food, just sprinkle it on as you would pepper, right? Or sea salt. And what you'll notice is that the gray hair on your head will start to turn more, it'll turn black. The melatonin is restored because the kidney essence is nurtured with the black sesame seeds. And it must be black sesame seeds. It cannot be the brown one. And so it's like these small things that, and there's also, black sesame seeds are also grounded into a powder and they're added to herbal formulas, like he shou wu, which is an herbal that you can take, and that also helps improve longevity. And so even in certain herbal formulas, you will find the root, the leaves, the barks, and the stem of a particular herb to help you get the nourishment that you've probably been lacking in, like dandelion root. Dandelion root is used in Chinese medicine, and it is added to other herbals to create a tea. And that's how teas became so powerful and well known, because that is how the Chinese would take their medicine. They drink it in a tea. And so cha, tea, is what they do. And your teas would change periodically as your condition evolves, and you begin to drink teas that probably don't have the herbs in them that you needed it before. So it's all about creating that pattern, just like the times and the years of the season. As the seasons change in nature, so does the seasons change in your body. And if we can be consistent with that practice and how we eat, we'll begin to understand the environment of our own body.
Well, and even looking at what's in season. So going back to, eating local, what is in season during that time frame is oftentimes exactly what the body needs during that time frame. Like right now I have dandelions popping up all over my lawn, and, most people go, dandelions, weeds in my lawn, but they're magic. You can use dandelion leaves and put them into the bottom of a cup, pour a little hot water over the top of it. And if you're getting edema in your legs, or like swelling in your ankles, swelling in your fingers, something really simple like that will actually have a really powerful effect. Be sure you're near a bathroom if you're going to do that, because it does make you urinate more. But, little things like that, like our plant medicine, the plants around us, like give us exactly what we need in the seasons that we do. And, the energetics of moving through those seasons as well. People complain about wanting to rest more in the winter time. Well, our culture says we need to live in this spring and summer energy all the time, and we need to be go, 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 go. But that's not how our bodies are built. And if you look outside your window, that's not how the seasons are built either. You need that time for rest and preserving that kidney energy that you were talking about, because it is the key to our longevity. So when you're looking at the tree that has no leaves in the middle of winter, it's doing a lot to get ready for the spring, but we just don't see it on the outside. So we pull in and we rest in the winter time. We eat certain foods to nourish us during that restorative phase. I do a lot with black sesame seeds during that time frame, by the way. That goes on everything in my house. My kids even tease me about it. But now that we're like moving into that spring and summer energy, you're starting to see more, we're coming into strawberry season up here anyway. Other parts of the country probably have already hit that period of time, but, you're now looking at red foods and the season of the heart. We've just come through the season of the liver, and that was the episode number 3 that came out for the Reproductive Rebel podcast, looking at what does that mean for me. We see more of these orange vegetables in the fall. Like, nature gives us what we need when we need it, if we're just open to looking at it that way.
And now for a quick break and a word from our sponsor.
I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I learned nearly enough about the physical and energetic demands of my adult female body when I was younger. Not Your Mama's Menstrual Course is an online self-study course to get exactly that, the information that most of us didn't get when our periods first started. In this course, I discuss the energetic changes and physical requirements of each phase of your cycle. Working in harmony with your cycle will help lessen your PMS symptoms and help you to properly support each phase of your cycle. Your month is comprised of so much more than just menstruation. There is a beautiful dance of hormones and energies that comprise our entire monthly cycle. Interested in learning more information? Get your copy of Not Your Mama's Menstrual Course today. Now, back to the show.
You've hit all the points, and this is like something that needs to be played on repeat, because this is actually it. I see a lot of patients with not fibromyalgia, but with fibroids and cysts, and they're like, their doctors are like, hey, this is normal. This is normal. We'll see how you do in a couple of days. No, not let's see how you do in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It's like, hey, what are you eating? Let's eat what's in season. And then I also see in practice a lot of patients will say, well, I don't like to eat vegetables. I don't like to eat this. I don't know how to cook this. Well, that is when we want to step into our highest power and challenge ourselves into, looking at recipes on how to make a squash, or, trying things that you've never tried before, because you never know what your taste buds will do. And so when we step into those unknowns and we realize the value of what, a squash can do for us, or what black sesames can do for us, we become more aware. And, our palate becomes even more broadened and widened. And then the beautiful side of it is that when you're at home and you're learning this discipline, when you do go out and you have like your meals with family and friends and you're celebrating, you really appreciate the foods that you used to be gluttonous over. So this is for anyone who thinks that, oh my gosh, I have to like change my whole entire lifestyle and I really don't want to do that. Or they kind of like roll their eyes at the change. But I'm here to tell you that this is not something that you have to completely change overnight right away. You gradually get into it, start taking more of an interest in it, ask questions, get on a call, do a discovery call, go on heal.me and pick out a practitioner, that you want to have a conversation with, and ask them, what is your take on these things, and start filling up your Rolodex of people you can turn to have these conversations with, because that's the ultimate, connecting with people.
That's an excellent point. And something that I wanted to bring into this conversation is how do you find the right person to help you be guided on this journey?
That's a really good question. I always ask myself that same question, because I meet a lot of practitioners, and many of them are very, structured in the way that they just do acupuncture, they just do herbal formulas, and it's just like, it's never been meant to be that way. So how do you find a great practitioner? It's not just one. It's a collection. It's like collecting nice little trinkets or whatever you like to collect. You want to have conversations around people who have multiple different specialties. So one place that I like to direct my clients to is acufinder.com. A great place to find an acupuncturist, thousands of practitioners around the country. We can find a practitioner in your zip code. nccaom.org is an organization where people can look up an acupuncturist in their zip code, and that's who actually gives us the national board certification to practice Chinese medicine in the United States. And recently, heal.me is just a really great directory. Now, these directories are growing and more people are coming on board by the day. But once you speak to one or two, then you start to get names of 2 or 3 more. And then you start to open up all of a sudden on Google or on your devices, will start coming up with all of these different, other practitioners that are doing retreats, or they're doing discussions, or, they're doing summits. And that is how you get on that journey, that wave. So it's not just about finding that one person. It's not about, just going based off that, what one person said. About using your discernment, your level of discernment, and that level of discernment that's basically something speaking to your heart and saying, this is who I need to be with right now in fellowship at this time. So you want to really ask yourselves, because our body has the ability to tell us truth, right? Through muscle testing, our body tells us what's good for us and what's not good for us if you're working with a practitioner who does muscle testing. And there's lots of ways to do muscle testing. And by the way, there's not just one. So you use your discernment. And what I mean by that is asking your heart, going inside and saying, is this the person that I need to speak with? Is this the doctor for me? And quite often you'd probably be surprised how many times you already do this and are not even aware of it. Many of my clients will say to me, my doctor said this and it just didn't feel right to me. Trust that feeling. And when you trust that feeling, then the right answers will come to you, and that right practitioner will come to you. And that comes to you with asking questions. You might not know all the questions to ask, but you can most definitely start somewhere and start asking, what you know or what you can. And then eventually more things will come into your vortex and you'll become more curious. And the more curious you are, the more you'll find practitioners who can answer those questions. And if they can't answer that question, then you just keep on looking. So it's not just about following one person or just, trusting that one person or having that one doctor. It's about having multiple conversations and then asking for referrals and references. And, you are on this discovery. You are the number one dictator of your body. So you ultimately make that choice. And we need to step into that power of making that choice for us and aligning ourselves with those who are in alignment with what we ultimately want to achieve.
Absolutely. One thing that I do get asked is, how do I tell if there are too many cooks in the kitchen? Because lots of practitioners, they all bring their perspectives, and sometimes multiple lenses to look at things is very productive. And sometimes clients find themselves in the middle of, well, I hear what you're saying, I hear what they're saying. How do I reconcile all of that?
It can be overwhelming. And I get that, you are looking for an expert in their field, right? And you want to be able to take the best answer, or you want to be able to get the best answer. And yes, we're all trying to, get your attention, but, it all comes down to understanding and knowing what is good for your body. I think a lot of times in our culture has been conditioned to believe that if there's a doctor before someone's name, then they're trustworthy, and we need to just, trust them because they obviously have more education and they're smarter than we are. That's not always true. There's good doctors and there's bad doctors. And so you want to really practice that discernment again. It really comes from within. There is nothing much that's stronger than you asking yourself, how does this feel to me? How does this feel to me right now? Does this feel like this is the best thing for me? Is there a natural way? If there is a natural way, what does that look like? Who can I go to find out? Who in my community embraces natural ways of healing? And then start there or go there. And then ask them, hey, I have a doctor who says this. What's your take on, this? And start asking those questions. Ask a doctor, what's your take on natural therapies? If they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, okay, go get another opinion. I remember I was at that point in my life too, where I didn't feel like I knew what direction to go in, and I had to do all the research myself. And I was asking doctors, and I just didn't get that connection. And I feel like as women in particularly, we feel that connection. We know we have that innate ability, and we have to trust that, because that is the other aspect of wellness that we are developing, that other wellness body. And when we start to understand and trust that knowing, then you're strengthening that weakness. So does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you, because we as women, and I talked about it in a previous episode, actually, this very concept that we have this innate knowing, and it's a really powerful part of our feminine energy. And we're just not taught in our culture to trust that. And a lot of times, when we're trying to come up in the world and build careers for ourselves and all of this stuff, we're trying to move from a cerebral space, and our head does the thinking for us. And then as we get older, we're like, hold on, my gut has been telling me all kinds of things my entire life. And the places I've gotten myself into trouble are the places where I've ignored that knowing that has happened in my body. And, a lot of times I'll have clients, and even in my own personal experience, where I look back and I go, man, if I had just listened to my intuition, that knowing, then I could have saved myself a lot of grief. So apparently that was a lesson that I needed to learn. But instead of learning it the hard way that I did, it's one of those things where if we can honor the fact that we as women have this innate knowing, and learn to trust that it never lies to us. Like whenever I see those posts about, if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what's the one thing that you would tell your younger self? And the one thing I would tell my younger self is, don't ignore your innate knowing, because you just know what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good to you, what feels in alignment and what feels off. And I've learned as I've gotten older to advocate for that innate knowing. But it's something that, it took me years to figure that out. And I became a healthier version and a more aligned version of myself when I started to trust in that little voice that says, I don't know how I feel about this procedure, or I don't know how I feel about what this doctor told me. I think I'm going to get a second opinion or a third opinion. And I'm really glad that I've started doing that, because I would have had a hysterectomy by 35. And now, even though I had an endometriosis diagnosis, I have a normal 28 to 30 day cycle, pain-free, symptom-free. It quietly appears, does its thing, and quietly disappears again. And even with an autoimmune condition, I have a healthy, pretty regular, normal period. And it's taken work. But if I hadn't listened to that innate knowing, I would have had an organ taken out of my pelvis. And, who knows what would have happened after that? You know what I mean?
These are stories that I love and admire, because you put in the work and you realize there's something much better. And that is ultimately it. We have to decide, am I ready to put in the work? Am I ready to ask myself these questions? And that's what it takes. Not only just finding a practitioner, but also identifying and knowing, what kind of food should I be eating? You already asked yourself that question when you go to the grocery store. I know I shouldn't be eating these, but I'm just gonna put them in there because I really want them. And then you look down the produce section, you're like, I really should be eating that, but I don't know how to cook it. So put in the work, grab the food, go look up a recipe and experiment. Sometimes that's just what it takes. And but you're absolutely right. Once you make those small shifts, your ability to understand what's going on in your body and your ability to form these relationships develop and evolve on all levels.
Absolutely.
Like I was saying earlier, you become more clairvoyant. And even so, when you start stepping into things like an acutonics, session, and you're getting treatment and you're treating that other body, when you're stepping into acupuncture or you're doing tribal medicine, you are strengthening your body's wellness ability on all levels. And you're seeing yourself from a different perspective. So.
Absolutely. And not only do you see yourself from a different perspective in those sessions, but then your perspective shifts as a result of those sessions, because they help you become more aligned with your true self. It's really a beautiful transformation. And I love being a practitioner on that journey with my clients, because yes, we talk about food. Yes, we talk about steam. Yes, I bring vibrational therapies into my practice, but really it's multiple tools in my toolkit to help people on their journey to their best and healthiest version of themselves in mind, body, and spirit.
Absolutely. And, I know that we've kind of like touched on so many different topics, but it's just inevitable. You can't just talk about food, it's like the whole entire body. And I think that's what the new paradigm is all about. It's not just about compartmentalizing your wellness. It's about, the new paradigm is about being incorporating of the whole body, not just the physical body, but all of the body. And that is the new wellness paradigm.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And I'm really excited because I feel like people are starting to be like, oh, there's more out there for me than going to my doctor, having them prescribe me a pill of some sort and sending me on my way. Or I have a real serious concern. My innate knowing is telling me that there's something wrong in my body. They've run these diagnostics on me. They tell me I'm fine. And I only get 15 minutes with my doctor and then I'm out the door. And even though I know that, Western medicine and allopathic approaches are a business, at the same time, like people are multifaceted, and we've been talking this whole time about the fact that a person is not a sum of parts. There's an energetic body, there's a physical body, like being able to look at all of that together to understand the whole person. Food is a really foundational piece of that, but it influences these other aspects of who we are as people. And that's one of the places that I'm really hoping that this platform is going to help create some meaningful conversations and some shifts. And yes, is there a time and place for Western allopathic? Yes. If I'm having an ectopic pregnancy, I want a very skilled OBGYN in that emergency room saving my life. But that is an acute care kind of thing that their toolkit is geared for. One area that people really struggle, and I see a lot of women that come into my practice that really struggle, is with the fact that this emotional and physical body and, the interplay of all of these facets of who they are one, not taken into consideration, and two, they can't have enough of a meaningful conversation with their practitioner that they feel heard. So that connection that you were talking about gets lost. And I think it's an integral part to care.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it on all levels, 1000%, 1000%. And I don't think that there is one holistic practitioner that would disagree with what you're saying, because, that it's just the basics. It's the basics.
Well, and a lot of us get into this work because we've run into roadblocks in the current standard of care, and we're looking for other places to be able to support what we know in this innate knowing is needing support. but sometimes we just don't know where to find it. So, so speaking of where to find it, I want to close with asking you how people can find you, and if you can share with us like a parting gem that you would like our listeners to take away with them today.
I just want everyone here who's listening today to realize that you are an incredible human being. You journeyed here to this earth for a purpose, and that purpose is not just to exist and to fulfill your life's passion. And the way that we do that is through really understanding our unique abilities, not only intellectually and physically, but also on a spiritual level. And that these conversations and discussions are not just designed to deter you in a different way that is not going to serve you, but they're designed to help open and broaden your horizon and your spectrum and your vision, the way that you see the world and the way that you see your life. So that way you can not only be a steward to yourself, but also to your family and the generations that will come after you. Mm-hmm. And so keeping these things in mind and knowing that you are a link in the chain and that we are all here connected and we're here a part of this plan and this project, this, this divine spiritual intervention that is being created. You are here for a purpose and a reason.
I love that. I love that. So if people want to reach out to you, because I know that you do have a telehealth portion to your practice, how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on the heal.me directory, and you can look up my profile there. I also have lots of reviews there. You can book a complimentary discovery session with me to see if we would even be a good match. I also teach ear seed therapy, so that way you can understand how to use ear seeds and apply them to your family. Very non-invasive way to use acupuncture. And I also have a website. My website is ChiC Wellness, CHIC wellness.org. It's a medical ministry, and in that medical ministry, there is a concierge service where I provide a one-on-one concierge holistic practice to anyone throughout the country, anyone throughout the world. My service to you is a service that is through divinity. So basically, a medical ministry means that when we work together for a greater period of time, I am able to honor your contribution to me and the church as a tithe, and that's how I provide a service to the people in my community.
Beautiful. Wonderful. So all of Dr. Antonika's information is going to be in the show notes. I just want to thank you so much for joining me on the program today. I always love talking with you. I feel like we always have amazing discussions, and I'm looking forward to having more amazing discussions on this podcast with you in the future. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'd love to have you on again. But thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible conversation that I really hope is going to be meaningful for a lot of people.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you so much for letting me be here with you.
Moon Essence is excited to bring you a new resource, the Moon Essence app. Moon Essence is a one-of-a-kind resource providing women a holistic way to support their reproductive health and wellness. Feel in the driver's seat of your own health with evidence-based interventions proven to decrease symptoms experienced with your cycle each month, increase your fertility, and ease life transitions for women in every phase of life. Empowering women's bodies with education about their health journey is the heart of our work. Head over to the Apple App Store or Google Play and download this free educational resource today. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider making a contribution to the Reproductive Rebel podcast. Your support, in any amount, helps us continue to inspire current and future generations. Show your love for this content in the listeners' support section below. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist, herbalist, sound healer, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment with Adrienne for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like us and follow Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.